It took place at a McDonald's with DB Cooper here tweaking and twisting on a Ronald McDonald House charity donation box, and you can just see the surgical precision. This is not his first rodeo. He's in and out in 30 minutes, super speed like a lightning bolt. Luckily, the footage was captured on a phantom 1000 frame per second camera, otherwise we'd only see his after image. It's currently unknown how much money he made off with, but it's no doubt a fortune. I imagine that it's probably close to $10 maybe, so this is one of the most impressive cases of larceny I've ever seen here. It was also captured on camera from two separate angles here, so we damn near have a 360-degree video that we can put together of this guy's absolutely embarrassing, degenerate scumbag behavior stealing from charity. So the employee is just standing there filming this whole thing, which is exactly what they should be doing. Intervening in something like this is very dangerous to the employees, so I know they're trained not to, and this should easily lead to identifying and arresting this man. I can see every goddamn fucking strained muscle in his face as he's cranking on this, so surely someone knows him and will report him. So Robin Hood here is stealing from those in need to give to the local crack dealer. For those of you that don't know, Ronald McDonald House is a charity that, from everything I understand about it, is actually a good one. What it does is it provides services to families of sick children that are having long hospital stays. So they have things like places for them to sleep, where they can just go and sleep for free while their children are undergoing treatment at specialized hospitals, so they don't have to pay for hotels or anything like that. And from everything I know, they just provide a lot of really good services to families of sick children that are in the hospital. So to steal from something like that is unfathomably low. And sadly, it's not the only time this has happened. This guy here who looks like meth incarnate is actually someone from my neck of the woods here in Tampa. And 3 years ago, he got nicknamed the Hamburglar. And what he did is he went on this rampage from Tampa to Wesley Chapel, going to McDonald's and stealing the Ronald McDonald House charity donation boxes. And it's assumed by authorities he made off with almost $4,000. So he rolls up in his motorcycle, and he always had this red jacket with him. It was like his magician's cape for his vanishing act with the charity boxes. So everywhere he went to the McDonald's, he had this jacket with him. So here's footage of him going into a McDonald's. He makes a small order. I think he just got a Coke or something, and not the Coke that he's used to. So he just did that so that way he'd have an excuse to sit at one of the tables, and he always sat next to the charity boxes. And he gets out his bolt cutters here and just starts going to town. So he starts cutting away at it so that way he could free it. And you can just see in the camera footage here, there is almost no money in that. This was at the height of COVID when he was doing this, so there were even less donations in those boxes. There is probably $5 or $6 there. He eventually cuts it enough where it's free. He throws on his backpack. He leans over to, I don't know, tap it on the ass or something. I actually don't know what he does right here, but he does one little maneuver there, gets up, he gets his red jacket out, and then here comes the big finale. He fiddles with his wiener a little bit there for some reason, maybe getting a semi-chub from all this adrenaline stealing from charity, and then bingo, bango, bongo, jacket over the box, and then he just lifts it off and walks out.
It's the place. This video is from yesterday in Wesley Chapel. It shows him making several trips to break the locks, holding the Ronald McDonald House charity box in place. Then he puts it under his jacket and walks out. Finally, he uses his motorcycle to pick it up and drive off. A few dollars richer, but a million reasons to be ashamed. Here's video of the time he stole from children who are sick in Zephyr Hills, May 26th.
So, what's crazy is, despite all of the footage that exists that clearly show this man's face, to date, I don't believe he's been caught. I was trying to find an update on it because the first video with the guy stealing the charity box reminded me of the Hamburglar here. And I looked into it and I couldn't find any updates on whether or not he'd actually been arrested. So I'm led to assume that he hasn't. Which is always so surprising to me when there's so much footage that exists of a criminal committing a crime and their face attached to it. I always just assume alright, dead to rights, your goose is cooked, Buster, take this, goober, they got you now. But in reality, that's just not how it works. It's not like these are blurry videos or anything. It's not like Sasquatch photos. You can clearly see the guy's face. And in my head up here, when I marinate on it in my noodle, I'm always like, okay, so now they're going to easily be able to identify him. But in reality, that's just not how it works. It's not like the face is like an IP address where the second you see it, you immediately know everything about the person. But I guess the way I imagine it is if he has a criminal record, you could probably take the footage of his face and run it through some kind of facial recognition scanner through the database of the authorities and match it that way. But if he doesn't, if he's somehow squeaky clean, there's not a whole lot they could do with it, I guess. So I imagine in cases like this, you'd have to rely on people helping you identify them, because when this came out, the authorities were making posts like on Facebook and stuff saying like, hey, we need help identifying this individual who's been stealing the Ronald McDonald House charity boxes. If you know anything, if you know him, please contact us to anonymously tip us off with who this is. And I guess there's just not many people that know this guy. I imagine his closest friends are the rats at the dumpster at the Walmart he passes out at every night after shooting up. So there probably just weren't a lot of people who recognized him. Thus, I guess he's been able to get away with it, unless there's an update I missed, but I went to like the 3rd or 4th page of Google, which is, that's forsaken territory right there. That's a barren wasteland going that deep. And I was reading through a ton of articles looking for some kind of update on this guy, and I couldn't find it, so maybe I missed it, or maybe he just really did get away with it. This dude's still out there on his motorcycle, cranking his hog after stealing all of that money from children and families in need. This guy and the first guy who stole the charity box absolutely deserve to be thrown in the slammer, obviously. And I just wanted to talk about this a little bit because I saw that video when a buddy of mine sent it, and it immediately reminded me of this previous case. It's also clearly not desperate people in need of money that are stealing these charity boxes. Like, this guy was riding around on, from what I can tell, a pretty expensive motorcycle at that. That's really about it. See ya. Yes, I know the quality of the webcam is less than stellar. It looks like the footage from The Dark Knight when the Joker is like selfieing himself as he's torturing a guy. I know it doesn't look great. It's highly pixelated, looking like PlayStation 1 graphics, Charles here, but it is what it is. It's the only webcam that I have, and I really want to talk about something since I can't sleep, which has become all too common. It's extremely late right now. It's 3 a.m. I gotta get up at 7 a.m. and I didn't sleep last night, and I'm not sleeping tonight. Insomnia is absolutely beating my cheeks in, and it's making me mad. But the only thing that makes me more upset than not being able to sleep is porch pirates, and that's what we're here to talk about. Since I was tossing and turning, having nothing but the most inopportune moments for deep existential thoughts, which kept me awake, I decided I'd go on the cyberspace to see if there's any kind of lullabies that could put me to sleep. Maybe Jigglypuff could sing me a song or something. But instead, all I found were 2 very peculiar cases of porch pirates stealing some packages that I just think are really interesting, so let's talk about them. You know that trope that exists in anime and other fiction where the villain is super smart with like the most creative and most galaxy brain scheme imaginable? Yeah, it doesn't usually happen in the real world. It's usually just a bunch of brain-dead morons that have the dumbest ideas and then commit a crime. But not in this case. We finally have a rare unicorn here with a turbo genius criminal. So, they wanted to steal a package, but they didn't want their identity to be compromised because most people have Ring doorbells or something similar in this day and age. So, how do you get around this? They don't have the mask technology that Mission Impossible does or anything, so they had to get creative. It seems like they found a nearby traffic cone and hid inside of it, which does a great job of concealing not only their face, but their whole body. This could be a full-grown man, full-grown woman, or a child. There's no telling. The only clues we have to go on are the barefoot pitter-patter from the door to the driveway. That's it. That's not a whole lot of clues. You'd have to get the forensics team out there and start like swabbing the concrete to see if you can get some kind of like DNA off it, maybe? I have no idea. So they might actually get away with this one. I do have a working theory though. I think the culprit here is someone that is familiar with the family. I think it's a family friend or maybe even a nearby neighbor. They knew they could be easily identified by the homeowner, which is why they took such extreme measures here. That, or it's staged. This could just be faked. This could be just a prank, like a staged video for the sake of it going viral, which it absolutely did. But I like to pretend and suspend disbelief here. I like to think that this was a real instance of a porch pirate coming up with a really creative solution. But anyway, there's no further updates that I can find on this story, so this menace is still at large. Sleep in fear. Or in my case, don't sleep at all, because insomnia is a real bitch. But also, if there's any traffic cones nearby, you might want to hide them somewhere so that way they can't be utilized like this and steal your packages. Now, while this one could be faked, the next one is not, because they've been caught. Though they did have an equally creative idea on how to get away with stealing packages. I'm kidding, it's actually a really fucking stupid idea. I'll just go ahead and show you the news segment on it.
DoorDash driver arrested. Police say she was caught on camera instead of taking. Take a look here. Police say Juliana Sagaram stole a package, as you see right there, from a Manhasset home last month. Video shows a woman walking up to the doorstep on Highland Terrace holding a brown paper bag there, and police telling us it was a Chipotle order she was supposed to deliver nearby. Neighbors say this is unbelievable.
So Juliana's plan was simple and also not super effective because she didn't get away with it. There were a lot of holes in this scheme. It wasn't exactly a bulletproof plan. While doing food delivery, she decided to take this package here, and I guess her whole idea was if she's in the middle of a food delivery, no one would think twice about her going up to the front of a house, and then she could make a getaway with the package without anyone stopping her. So it seems the whole idea was to avoid suspicion by having a good cover story. No, I'm not here to steal packages. I'm here to deliver food. You're out of order. You lost your marbles. But she failed to account for modern technology, where most people have like Ring doorbells now or anything that records video outside their home, because of the rising problem of porch pirates. So it didn't do anything to prevent the authorities from seeing who she was. And I guess really she just wanted to make sure no one would like interfere with her plan. But I don't know how common that is. Like, I don't feel like there's a ton of people that recognize when a porch pirate is striking, because they usually run up, grab it, and run away. There's not a whole lot of time for someone to fucking swoop in and stop them, unless of course she's doing this in Gotham City and Batman happened to be nearby in the neighborhood. Like, I just don't think that is really commonplace. So overall, Buddy with the traffic cone over his head actually had a more effective strategy than she did. But anyway, I just wanted to talk about these because they were super silly. They both came up with pretty creative plans on how to be a scumbag, and one of them so far has got away with it. The other one is at least facing charges, so that's good that she's, been caught. And I guess we'll see if the traffic cone supervillain pops out of hiding at some point again in the future. But anyway, that's about it. So yeah. You know that wild feeling where you take notice of something and then you start seeing it everywhere soon after? For example, you're driving around on the road and your little peepers catch a glimpse of a unique blue car and you're like, man, that's a really interesting color for a car. I don't see that very often anymore. And then you'll drive like a block up the road and then all of a sudden there's like 8 blue cars that come out of nowhere, it seems, and it's like, damn, now I'm trapped in an alternate dimension where there's only blue cars. How did this happen? I just saw one for the first time in a long time a block ago. There's actually a word for that. It's called the frequency illusion, or the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon. I think that's how you pronounce it. I may have absolutely butchered it. I couldn't tell you. But basically what it is a cognitive bias where when you notice something for the first time, you start to notice it a lot thereafter. It kind of just puts that in your noodle and you become more perceptive and aware of it, and it makes it seem like all of a sudden it's more common than it is. I can still remember the first time I remember this happening to me. I was playing Grand Theft Auto Vice City and I saw a really rare vehicle that I don't think I'd ever seen before, so I did everything in my power to acquire it, and I finally do through blood, sweat, tears, elbow grease, and my little child brain was blown by how cool I felt with this new vehicle. And then as I'm driving away, there's like 8 more of those bitches driving in the opposite direction, and I was stunned. Now maybe it was a game mechanic, I never even bothered to check, but I think more likely than not it was just an example of this frequency illusion. Point is, the reason I'm mentioning this, I just made a video covering that Forklift ATM heist from like 2 days ago, And now, all of a sudden, I've been inundated with stories that are popping up about, like, heavy machinery robberies. And I feel like this just has to be another example of the frequency illusion, because there's no way that this is a very common crime. There is no way that there's some kind of mind plague that's infecting people's brains, making them believe that stealing excavators, forklifts, front-end loaders, garbage trucks, in order to commit crimes with them is a good idea that will somehow work. Like, there's just no way that it's that common. It has to be, I'm more perceptive of it now. But to argue against myself, I don't think there ever would have been a time where my eyes would just glaze past a headline that talks about a guy stealing a front-end loader and stealing motorcycles with a front-end loader. Like, I feel like I would have always been aware of that. So maybe this is just becoming like the new crime meta. Just stealing, like, machinery you'd find at some kind of mining operation and using that to commit crime across the city with. I don't know. Okay, let me go ahead and show you this front-end loader robbery and subsequent low-speed pursuit. This is actually some wild work out of GTA right now. I feel like you could have accomplished the same thing with just a brick. Like, I don't even think you needed to steal the front-end loader, to be honest. Like, it was probably a lot more difficult to find this vehicle than it would be to just find, like, a big rock. Oh, wait. I see. Now I see what the plan was. Wait, this guy's galaxy brain. This is an incredible scheme. He got the Christmas presents. I mean, he's kind of busting up the bikes on the way home here. He's not doing a great job of securing the package.
Put it down, mate. He is not stopping. He is not stopping.
I was legitimately stunned by the depth of this plan having more layers to it than just take big vehicle, crash into building, and then go in and take the goodies and call it a night. This guy pre-planned this for what I imagine must have been months. He not only found a front-end loader that was prime for the pickin', but then he also went into the building with ratchet straps, I guess, and put them together as if it was like grapes on a vine, and then had the perfect attachment for the front-end loader, the hook, in order to actually carry away the bikes on it. Like, there was a lot more than I would have expected here. Like, Jesus Christ, I was half expecting the front-end loader to turn into a goddamn Decepticon committing the crime. This was a shocking revelation. And, of course, the subsequent chase afterwards is where everything went tits up. He clearly only planned the first part and not the second part. I don't know how he thought he could make some kind of inconspicuous getaway with a fucking rogue front-end loader with two motorbikes dangling off of it like truck nuts. Like, there was no world where that wouldn't tip off the authorities. And this is not exactly the optimal getaway vehicle. So you can see the vehicle's not really zooming around too quickly and the bikes are banging against each other. I also couldn't help but giggle at the officer telling him to put it down like it's a child who's got a cookie he wasn't supposed to have before eating his vegetables. Like, brother, this man stole a front-end loader. You think he's just going to give up that easily? No. He is committed to this for the long haul.
Okay, run over the bikes. Everybody stay well clear of this tractor.
Oh, he already dropped them, but oh boy. Oh boy. This vehicle's not fast enough for this kind of engagement.
Okay, he's dropped the
And he shed the entire front battering ram. Oh god. I don't know how he gets out of this one. Unless his friend stole a helicopter and then gets like a giant magnet to airlift him out. I don't think there's any way he actually gets out of this situation though. Oh! Oh! He's ripping some gnarly maneuvers. This is a very interesting chase. We left the roads and now we're in God's country. Oh my god. Wait, the officer's on the tracks too. Wait, this officer action here is about it. This man's like, it's finally my chance. I didn't think I'd ever get to do this. We're gonna need a good Samaritan to pull him over and like an equally strong front loader. Fight fire with fire.
In the bush. Got all his clothing in the creek.
Oh boy. We're on foot now. He's naked.
Hands in the air now! Good boy, mate, good boy.
He tried to throw off the dog's scent by getting nude. But that was a pretty cool chase. That was one of the more interesting ones I've seen in a while. Should have found a... Should have found a skunk and got sprayed. Your brain is huge. That's such a good idea. Yeah, he could have hidden his scent if he had just subjected himself to the skunk smell. But then he still would have needed to find a really good hiding place where they wouldn't find him. Instead of throwing your clothes away, just dress up as a deer. I don't know. If you're going to try and disguise yourself, I think you actually have a better chance of disguising yourself as a cop. Like, imagine he gets out of the front loader, runs into the forest, and he has, like, a cop uniform waiting for him, complete with, like, flashlight and everything, and service pistol, and he's, like, just looking around and just talking with the boys. Like, you'd probably get further with that approach. They finally caught him, but this man was operating on, like, demon mode here. He hatched a nefarious plot with the front-end loader, and he tried to see it through, but he didn't quite have what it takes. I still can't believe that he had the chutzpah to steal a front-end loader, get the proper, like, hook attachment for it, get the ratchet straps, and set up the motorbikes in a way that they can be lifted out with the front-end loader and hook. But he didn't plan the most obvious part, which would be, how the fuck do you get away? He had no plan for that. All he did was start just driving down public roads and then was, like, shocked that the cops somehow got on his tail. I don't understand. And this is, like, as I mentioned in the very beginning, this feels like it's being more common, with stealing things like excavators and forklifts and all that to commit wild crime. Like, it feels like it's being more common, but again, this could just be an example of the frequency illusion. I'm not sure yet. But anyway, it's always wild when that happens. Jinkies. It is always such an adventure to watch that. But anyway, yeah, that's really about it. So yeah. I don't know if it's movies or Grand Theft Auto 5 that's rotted my brain, but when I think of bank robberies, I always picture some absolutely massive event that's thoroughly planned and it's a huge deal. Like when I hear, oh, a bank got robbed, I'm expecting the follow-up sentence to be, and then Spider-Man stopped the robbers. I've just always imagined bank robberies like it's straight out of a cartoon, you know, high-tech security, damn near impossible to pull off successfully. You know, you see like an Ocean's 11 movie, you're like, wow, no one's ever going to be able to actually rob a bank like this, huh? They've just always made it sound so fucking wild, saying things like, alright, we're going to need a 20-person team in order to pull this one off successfully, boys. The target is a 15-inch thick steel titanium concrete vault door that's protected by a retina scanner and biological deposit box for fingernail clippings, and it'll only accept it from the head honcho of the bank. You also have to sing the fast part to Eminem's Rap God, and if you fuck up a single lyric, the alarm sounds and the FBI swarming within 30 seconds. It's also protected by a moat with 45 crocodiles inside and 24/7 security, and they're all ex-Navy SEALs. We're gonna have to be in and out within 5 seconds. The job is simple. You know, like, in my tiny reptile brain hears all this, and I'm like, wow. Well, no one's ever going to be able to actually rob a bank, huh? For some reason, I've just been under the assumption that banks in the real world have similar security protocol. Obviously, not with, like, all the sci-fi security protocols, like infrared laser beams everywhere that you have to dodge. I've just been under the assumption that they're highly protected and robbing them is still extremely difficult. But in reality, that's just not the case. Bank robberies happen all the time, and they are nothing like they are in the movies. I want to show you a recent bank robbery that happened in Orlando. This is about a week old. You have to see this to believe it. Yeah, that's right. Your eyes aren't playing tricks on you. The alleged bank robber is Mr. Incredible himself. This dude threw on the Incredibles t-shirt, popped on the shades, and said, "It's showtime." And this was a successful robbery, by the way. I'll explain his method in just a moment, but here's the security camera footage showcasing the culprit. And he got away with it for now. He wasn't caught. He's still at large. So if you do recognize that man, make sure to call that Crime Stoppers hotline. Now, you're probably scratching your head wondering to yourself, where was the robbery? Charles, you forgot to show the climax. You didn't show where he actually robbed them. But you're wrong. You just witnessed the robbery. That was the entire operation. The extent of his plan was to go into the bank and ask for the money. So he demanded money from the teller and they gave it to him and he walked out. That's how that bank robbery went. He didn't flash any weapons. I haven't read any reports about him making threatening remarks or anything like that. They just explained that he demanded money from the teller, which he received, and then fled the scene. Now, the use of the word demanding in the reports leaves a lot of wiggle room for what could have been said or done from the guy to get the money. You know, maybe he went in there and was threatening the employees or seemed to just be like this menace. Maybe he treated it like a Call of Duty Xbox Live lobby and got real loud, vocal, screaming, this and that. And I have always said it's never worth risking your life for the business you work at, you know? If someone comes in there and they're saying, you know, empty the register, you're gonna get it, bub, it's best just to comply. What's the point in risking life and limb for the business you work at? It's simply not worth it. Plus, insurance covers all of it for the business anyway. So it's just, you really shouldn't be, like, willing to die for your job, I would say. So I have no ill will towards the teller here who did give this guy the money. I just find it super interesting that this is the technique that was used for a successful bank robbery, just going up and asking for the money. It doesn't seem like he did anything beyond that. His plan was as simple as it gets. Can I have some more of that cash? In fact, I'm not asking, give me more of that cash. And they did. So I decided to look into it a bit. And it turns out all bank tellers are instructed to always follow the thief's instructions no matter the case, whether a weapon is produced or not. If there is a thief there demanding money, it is the bank teller's responsibility to follow it. They're instructed to follow along no matter what because their safety is of paramount importance. So that caught me by surprise because I wasn't sure. I knew bank tellers always had to go along with like someone who shows a weapon or something. Like they're not going to try and, you know, make a holdout and challenge them to a fist fight in order to disarm them or anything. I just thought like they had to produce like a weapon or some kind of threat or like reasonable showcase that they're going to cause a problem. I didn't realize that if they even just hinted at wanting to rob them, that they had to follow along. So that was a little surprising to me, but it makes complete sense, and I completely agree with that ruling as well. However, I still think this guy's planning is lackluster, to say the least. He didn't even make an attempt to conceal his face. The closest thing he has to a disguise is just some sunglasses he picked up at the gas station, probably on the way to the bank. Now, I don't want to undersell the importance of his wardrobe pick for the day. I think the Incredibles shirt really sealed the deal. There's a good chance this crashes and burns if he's wearing just like a normal Abercrombie & Fitch shirt or something, but he threw on the Incredibles shirt. That right there adds like a +10 to intimidation. They didn't know who they were fucking with, and they weren't taking any chances. So he got away with it for now. He's managed to elude authorities, as I understand it. So overall, just like a really goofy, wild story that I happened to stumble across today and just wanted to share with all of you. This is not at all how I imagined bank robberies going in the real world. I very rarely have ever read about any in the real world, aside from like the big ones where there's getaway cars, like massive police chases, shootouts. You know, I haven't heard of any like this, so I just found it to be pretty interesting. That's about it. So yeah.
Tokyo, December 10th, 1968. It was pouring rain.
Not really ripping it off, Mickey, I don't think.
Trust
Just
Bank
inspired
was
by.
on edge. Someone had threatened his life and those around him over the past few months. Just 4 days prior, a letter, one of recent many, was sent to his personal residence demanding 300 million yen or his house would be blown up with dynamite.
Holy
the
shit.
letter was made up of characters cut out
Some
and
Looney
pasted
Tunes shit.
from movie magazines. Police were notified, and indeed they kept a close eye on the bank and his home, though this did not ease the mind of the bank manager, who shared his concerns with his branch employees. Now, of course, this is Japan, and work is work. The show must go on. With this in mind, the bank manager went on with his duties, sending 4 of his employees to the nearby Toshiba factory to make a scheduled drop. So off they went, taking the company car. But not long after leaving the bank, the 4 heard police sirens approaching. At that very moment, they happened to be next to a prison of all places. A police officer screeched to a halt in front of the car and frantically got off his motorcycle to warn them. The branch manager's home had just been blown up. People were injured.
Wait,
some
really?
Presumably worse. Despite police monitoring the locations, the perpetrator was still able to carry out.
Wait, so he actually successfully blew this shit up?
Additional threats were made. The bank in particular was now a target, and branch employees were at risk, especially those who had left the bank earlier to carry out bank duties. The officer got down underneath to check the car, but before he could do a proper search, an employee started noticing smoke and flames emerging from the vehicle. Fearing the car was about to explode, the officer desperately tried to roll out of the way. Everyone ran as fast as they could to safety, retreating behind the prison walls. They waited and waited for the explosion, but there was no explosion. They looked back.
Oh, so they were
The
fooled.
company car was gone. The police officer was gone. Had he moved the car to safety? Confused, they called the Nihon Trust Bank to find out what was going on. To their relief, the bank manager answered. He was alive and well. In fact, everything was fine there, the bank manager's home was never blown up. As the adrenaline wore off, it finally dawned on them what had happened. This was the moment the perpetrator had been setting up the past few months. Disguised as a police officer, he had now gotten away with what was to be the bonus payments of 523 Toshiba employees. The stolen amount totaled to 300 million yen or $6 million.
Not
Exactly the amount
bad!
he had asked for. On the ground, they found various items left behind, including a warning flare that the officer must have ignited while under the car to mimic dynamite. A reported 120 pieces of evidence was left behind at the crime scene, which is a lot and would normally be beneficial, but this was purposely done to mislead.
Whoa!
This worked.
What the
Half a
fuck? This is
century later,
nuts!
The case remains unsolved. Some say
Turns
this
out he
was the
trimmed his
greatest
pubic
heist
hair to live
in
DNA,
Japanese
but it
history.
wasn't his
There was
pubic
no
hair.
loss of life, no blood
A red
spilled.
herring.
The plan meticulously carried out by a single person, and in the end, the money taken. But there are many ways a bank heist can be great. There are many ways it can be notable. Take the case on May 15th, 2016. At around 5 a.m. in the early hours,
Oh,
cash
right,
was
Phoenix Jones, I
physically
forgot to do
withdrawn
that.
from an ATM
I like Phoenix
from
Jones.
a Tokyo 7-Eleven. The amount was 100,000 yen, about $880, which was the cash limit. Now, this doesn't seem too bad, but try repeating this 14,000 times across Japan in the span of just 2 hours, because that is exactly what happened. In total, 1.4 billion yen, about $13 million, was taken from ATMs alone. And this wasn't done electronically.
What?
It was done in person. Sure, it had to be some sort of a large, coordinated group, but the staggering number of transactions in a 2-hour frame made even this seem questionable. Compared to other notable cases, the largest known recorded number of participants to have been
How in
involved
the
in a
fuck?
single heist wouldn't have been able to pull this off either, unless they had superpowers. Involving an even larger team would presumably be unwise, as there'd be too many chefs in the kitchen. Now, after police completed their painstaking
Jesus
process
Christ!
of checking security footage of each 7-Eleven store, and yeah, it was only 7-Eleven's hit, they found their answer. In this particular case, the more chefs the better. It wasn't a team of 50 or 100 or even 200. It was 600 people. 600 people pulling off a sophisticated, highly coordinated heist using fake credit cards. Quite the contrast from the single perpetrator
Thanks to
of our
Prime,
first heist.
Toto,
Not
and Recep
surprisingly,
Kaze.
most people have surmised with this many active participants, there must have been links to a large crime organization. But as of today, despite the numbers, no one of note has been caught. Now, here's a quick one. Kobe, August 7th, 1990.
How in the fuck can you not catch a single person in that if you knew exactly what places they were hitting with security cameras? How does that happen?
The story so unique is
How do you
that
fuck
10
that up?
days after the heist, the bank, still reeling from the events, received a note from the robbers. The note read, "Thank you very much for the bonus. We can now live on this loot for the rest of our lives." It was a sincere message of gratitude. Yeah, we all know the reputation Japanese people have for being polite, but this took it to another level. So the last 3 cases involved plans being executed perfectly
He's the prime
with
writer.
no loss of life. But not the case with the next one. We're going way back. January 26,
Thanks to Recep
1948.
Brendan.
Again in Tokyo, a man in his 40s walked into a branch of the Imperial Bank just before closing time. 16 people were inside, including customers and bank workers. He got everyone's attention and explained he was a government health inspector sent by the US occupation authorities. Remember, this was post-war Tokyo, still under US occupation. The man stated there was a sudden
These are some
outbreak
Frosty
of
Nips.
dysentery in the area, and he was to
Ooh,
carry
Oregon
out
Trail.
inoculations. In post-war Tokyo, the disease was a legitimate threat, so no one really doubted him. Add to the fact that the man was wearing an official government armband. He gave all 16 people a pill and a few drops of liquid, which they quickly drank. Now, it wasn't long until they fell, one by one, in agony.
Oh,
With
fuck.
everyone incapacitated, the so-called health inspector grabbed all the money he could find and calmly left. 12 of the 16 people would later be confirmed dead, including a young child. The solution they drank was a cyanide solution.
Holy
This was a
shit.
ruthless way to go about a heist. But what made this even more strange was that the man left behind a business card. He left it at the scene. The card was marked with the name Shigeru Matsui, apparently from the Department of Disease Prevention, which does make sense since he was pretending to be a health official. But Shigeru Matsui turned out to be a real person who actually worked for the Department of Disease Prevention. Not surprisingly,
He killed him and
upon
took the
investigation,
shit?
Matsui was cleared. He was not the robber. He had several alibis. but he told police he had exchanged business cards with 593 individuals.
How would he know that
Japanese
number?
people have the habit of exchanging business cards with personal details, so this was helpful. as
Oh, I
police
guess you could
now
just
had
look at every business card.
593 suspects. Over time, they were able to whittle down this number to just 8 cards, 8 suspects, one of which was a man named Sadamichi Hirasawa, a Japanese painter. When Hirasawa was questioned and asked to produce the card of Shigeru Matsui's, which he should have had, he could not. He claimed it must have been in his wallet, which was stolen the other day. He was a victim of pickpocketing. Police had a feeling they knew exactly where the card was.
He could have
When
just
asked
lost the
police
card.
alibi,
I don't keep business
he could not.
cards.
When police looked into his history, they found 4 previous cases of bank fraud. When they searched his possession, they found a similar amount of money to that stolen from the bank. Hirasawa suspiciously refused to divulge how he got this money. Finally, when his face was shown to eyewitnesses, they immediately identified him as the poisoner. Upon further interrogation,
Oh, that was easy.
Hirasawa
Good work.
confessed. He was arrested for the robbery and the murders, and in 1950, he was given the death penalty. He was sent to death row to await execution by hanging. Case closed. Or is it? Because after the trial, some had doubts whether Sadamichi
What?
Hirasawa was indeed the perpetrator. Everything mentioned, circumstantial. In fact, it was revealed his confession was viciously beaten out of him.
Thanks to Tier 1
allegedly
Supreme
tortured.
in the Prime
There was only
Yodi
2 of the
resub.
eyewitnesses who
Demon.
identified him as the criminal. Perhaps he was telling the truth. Perhaps he was really a victim of pickpocketing, as he claimed. The unexplained origin of the money in his possession was also thought by some to be from his side business of drawing pornographic pictures. Revealing this truth to police and to the public would have been detrimental to his reputation as an artist. There was also no way
So he was a
Hirasawa could
hentai artist?
realistically obtain the ingredients for what turned out to be a military-grade cyanide solution used in the robbery. Interestingly, some have claimed that the true culprit was actually a former member of the notorious Unit 731, a covert biological and chemical warfare research and development unit of the Imperial Japanese Army that undertook lethal human experimentation during wartime. If so, this would explain the accessibility to the poison. The Minister of Justice himself doubted Hirasawa's guilt, and so never signed the death warrant. This opinion was shared by successive ministers of justice, so the death sentence was never actually carried out. And so Hirasawa sat in prison on death row for the next 32 years of his life, one of the longest tenures ever on death row. And on May 10th, 1987, he caught pneumonia and died in a prison hospital. Despite the verdict, the case was never truly put to rest, and many people felt that the true culprit, all those years ago, would have been within grasp if only the focus was on the right person. This brutality
It does
happened in
seem
1948,
very
but 7
odd that a
years on,
painter
there
would come
emerge
up with
a
that.
new type of heist. January 25th, 2000.
That seems extremely hardcore.
Cybercrime. The Tokyo-based exchange Coincheck, one of the most prominent virtual currency exchanges in Asia,
Thanks
was
to
the fall
Prime, just
victim
Kier
to the
and
biggest
resub sauce.
cryptocurrency heist in history.
What do you mean, water?
At 2:57 a.m., using overseas servers, hackers, disguising themselves as authorized users, were able to enter the system. They remained undetected for the next 8.5 hours, stealing 58 billion yen worth of the cryptocurrency NEM, which is about $530 million. Then they were gone. This incident became an embarrassment to the Japanese government, who had been trying to make Tokyo the global center for cryptocurrency. Coincheck revealed they failed to implement the required extra layer of security,
Thanks
but
to
even
Prime
worse,
Dominic.
the stolen currency had been kept online in a hot wallet, rather than in a much more secure offline storage facility known as a cold wallet. This is similar to if a convenience store kept significantly large amounts in a cash register instead of an off-premise bank vault. Now, one of the stranger aspects of the heist is that the stolen virtual funds were able to be traced online, because transactions for Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies are all public. And so the $530 million worth was eventually traced back to 11 specific addresses. But the identities of those sending and receiving the money, unfortunately, remained anonymous. Indeed, no one yet has been caught, but the developers of NEM were able to label the 11 addresses with specific warning tags for all to see. They also set up a tracking tool to automatically reject exchanges involving the stolen funds.
This is a small museum with only a handful of guests visiting each day, and the security guard has just seen 2 of them, a man and a woman, walk briskly out of the front door. The guard sprints outside and catches sight of the couple getting into a car, and, sure enough, the museum's missing painting is sitting on the back seat.
That was easy.
As
Case
luck would
closed.
have it, the museum happens to be situated opposite a police station, and soon enough, the thieves are in custody. But at the subsequent trial, it's clear the man is extremely remorseful. It was he who took the painting, a spur-of-the-moment decision he deeply regrets. Since the man's criminal record is clean, he's released with a suspended sentence,
What?
serving no jail time.
Nice.
Nobody
Good
knew it
work.
at the time, but the Swiss authorities had just let the greatest art thief in history slip through their fingers. This is the remarkable story of
Nice.
Stefan Breitwieser, a
Hey,
Frenchman
Stefan.
who stole almost $1.5 billion worth of art. To put that number into perspective, if
Yeah,
you were
no
to
one to
don
sell
your
it to.
best cat
They're not
burglar's
gonna
outfit
launder
now
money
and
through
nick
him.
the 3 most expensive paintings ever sold at auction: Leonardo da Vinci's Salvador Mundi, $450 million, Wilhelm de Kooning's Interchange, $300 million, and Cézanne's The Card Players, $250 million, you would still need to pilfer another $500 million worth of art to surpass Stefan Breitwieser's record. The sheer volume of art Stefan stole is genuinely almost unbelievable.
Thanks to
But
give some
perhaps
res.
even more unbelievable is what he did with it all after he'd stolen it.
He ruined it
Yes,
for
I'm getting
fun.
ahead of myself. For now, it's probably best if I start at the beginning. And
I
like
bet
all
that
good
son of a
stories,
bitch stole my
this
socks
one
too.
starts with cheese.
Yeah.
Sort of. In March 1995, Stefan Breitwieser was visiting Gruyères, the Swiss town that gave its name to a kind of cheese you've almost certainly enjoyed if you've ever tucked into a traditional Swiss fondue. But Stefan wasn't in town
Can't say I
for
have.
molten dairy products.
Thanks, Prime Josh.
Along with his new girlfriend, Anne-Catherine Kleinklaus, Stefan had his heart set on seeing
Thanks for some
Gruyère's
renegade.
medieval castle, specifically its collection of exquisite art. As the couple strolled through the ancient corridors, one piece in particular caught Stefan's eye. A portrait by German painter Christian Wilhelm Dietrich. Staring at the painting, Stefan experienced one of those weird urges that we all have from time to time. A brief and intense desire to do something we really shouldn't. Something like jumping off a bridge, tripping up a passing pensioner, or
What?
stealing a painting. By the way, don't feel bad if you occasionally fancy downing an OAP. These kinds of inappropriate urges are so common, they actually have a name: cacoephes. For most people,
That's a cool
cacoephes
name.
last
Cool
a couple
name.
of milliseconds, but Stefan's lingered. So much so that he mentioned it to that new girlfriend of his. Now, I'd suggest that admitting you're tempted to commit a serious felony to your new Tinder date is usually a good way to earn yourself the in-person equivalent of a swipe left. But, to Stefan's surprise, his new girlfriend was all for it. The castle was basically deserted. Apparently all the tourists were off eating fondue, and all Stefan had to do was remove the painting from its frame, slip the canvas into his rucksack, and walk.
Well, that's
out the
easy. They were
front
just
door.
asking for it to be stolen. He did them a
Anticlimactic,
favor.
but an international art crime career, the likes of which the world had never before seen, had just begun.
Thanks, Risa Binder.
Because, over the course of the following 6 years, Stefan completed a grand total of 230
Jesus
successful
Christ.
art heists at 172 galleries in at least 7 different countries. Art
Sounds like there's
thievery
no
isn't
security,
typically
so I know
regarded as
exactly
a
how he did it.
steady long-term career choice. Sooner or later,
Thanks,
you're
Prime
either
Outlaw.
going to
There's some
get
Samster.
caught or make so much cash that you can retire to your own private island in Micronesia. If you're picturing grand heists with
True
Ocean's
cooking.
11 style planning and huge teams of specialists, you're dead wrong. There were no carefully or orchestrated distractions, no detailed museum schematics, and no jaunts through conveniently positioned air vents. In fact, these heists weren't even committed at night. They took place during opening hours and
Yeah,
often
people
with
probably
tourists
just saw
and
him
security
steal.
guards in the very same room. But all were almost laughably basic, pretty much involving waiting till nobody was looking, and then simply picking up whatever he fancied and walking out the front door. Paintings would be
Yep,
slipped
that
from
sounds about
frames
right.
and hidden under a loose-fitting coat. And display cases were opened with a screwdriver one twist at a time over the space of 20 minutes or so. The most high-tech
And
piece of
nobody
equipment
saw this
Stefan owned
in
was an old
172
telescopic
galleries?
radio antenna,
172
which he
galleries,
used
no
to
one saw him
prod
do this?
any inconveniently placed CCTV cameras into facing away from whatever it was he was about
And nobody
to
saw
steal.
this?
It's hard to believe that's all it took for Stefan to pilfer close to $1.5 billion worth of loot.
What?
But these basic tricks were so effective, he was often able to steal from the same museum multiple times in the space of just a few weeks. I should point out that estimates as to the exact value of the artwork Stefan stole vary. But the figure most commonly quoted is the one I mentioned earlier, $1.4 billion. According to the New York Times, it might have been as much as 1.9 billion. And if that upper limit is correct,
How in
as
the
of
fuck?
2001, when this remarkable crime spree came to an abrupt end, Stefan Breitwieser, art thief, would have been amongst the top 250 richest people on the planet.
But he has no one to sell it to.
Not that you'd have known it from looking at him. In fact, to the outside world, Stefan and Anne Catherine, now his long-term girlfriend, appeared to be stone cold broke. Kitchen
No, you
dog's
can't
body,
sell the paintings.
Whilst Anne Catherine
All
was
this
in
shitty
nurse.
art is just used for money
was
laundering.
So short that Stefan's mother
No one's
often
gonna
helped the
launder
couple
money
out
through
with
Stefan.
Food and petrol money. Was this apparent poverty some kind of front then? A Gus from Breaking Bad style cover story to hide their immense wealth from the outside world? Stefan and Anne Catherine appeared close to destitute because that's exactly what they were. Despite having stolen well over $1 billion worth of fine art,
How did they
the
not
pair
catch him
hardly
by
had
seeing
2
who pushed the
cents to
camera?
rub together.
That's what I want to know.
And not because they'd blown their riches on boats and hoes either. Despite having taken enormous risks to steal hundreds of treasures of almost unimaginable value, Stefan Breitwieser never sold a single one of them. Not one. And the reason why is kind of hilarious. Stefan didn't become the world's greatest art thief to get rich quick. He did so because he loved art. Instead of selling the pieces he stole, he kept them in the apartment he shared with Anne Catherine, simply to have the pleasure of owning and admiring them.
Just print it out
Incidentally,
on
the apartment
Google.
in question was in the attic of Stefan's mother's house in the
What the
city
fuck is
of
the point?
Mulhouse, France. The couple were so poor they couldn't afford to rent. But selling a world-famous piece of art
It's
is
impossible.
a seriously tricky business.
no, it's not gonna
You
happen.
can't just set up an eBay listing and watch the £1 million bids roll in. The market for this kind of thing is tiny, and in order to access that, you're probably going to need to make friends with some very dangerous people to help you get the word out. But since Stefan never put a single piece of art up for sale, he remained essentially invisible to the police. If they didn't catch him in the act of stealing, they weren't going to
Or
catch him at all.
catch him in the act of
particulars
pushing a
Stefan's
camera
crime
away
spree
while
was
on
so
camera.
unusual that the police had basically no idea who or what they were dealing with. Their best guess was that some kind of highly professional international cartel was behind the crimes.
Far more
But
embarrassing.
in reality, they were utterly stumped. Stefan simply couldn't stop, and it was only a matter of time before something went wrong.
Someone opened their
The item
eyes.
that eventually ended his reign of art-based terror was, of all things, a bugle. At the start of this video, I mentioned that Stefan had been caught stealing a painting in Lucerne back in 1997. He'd gotten away with little more than a slap on the wrist at the time, but during the process of being booked, he'd had his fingerprints taken. From that moment on, he'd been careful to wear gloves during his thefts, to ensure he never left behind any prints that could be matched to his earlier arrest. Oh, and by the way, just to make things even spicier, this bugle happened to be located in the Richard Wagner Museum in, of all places, Lucerne, the very same city he'd been caught
Aww.
the first time.
Stefan.
I told you this man had balls of legend. So it was decided that Anne Catherine should be the one to
Oh,
erase the
Jesus
prints.
Christ.
But this was a risky job, and Stefan decided to travel with her for a bit of moral support. As
This
Anne
guy's
Catherine entered
outrageously
the museum,
dumb, it's
Stefan
crazy.
took a walk around the grounds to distract himself from worrying. Unfortunately for him, he was recognized by a man who'd seen him at the museum on the day of the theft. The police were called, and Stefan soon found himself being arrested for a second time. To begin with, he wasn't unduly concerned. After all, he'd been caught before and gotten away with it. All he had to do was convince the police he was a remorseful first offender. And at first, that little ruse seemed to be effective. But then, something changed. The officers holding Stefan stopped engaging with him, and the sympathy his remorseful idiot routine had earned him evaporated overnight. Stefan started to fear the worst, and with good reason. Someone in the department had uncovered the report from the previous theft in Lucerne, and as a result, the police were no longer viewing him as an opportunist who'd snapped the bugle on impulse, but as a potential serial
The
arc.
dumbest thief of all
A few
time.
weeks after the arrest, Swiss police secured an international search warrant, allowing them to enter Stefan's attic apartment in Mulhouse. You know, the one containing $1.5 billion worth of stolen art. It's safe to say that as the team of officers arrived to carry out the search, none of them were prepared for what they would find inside Stefan's modest home. Which was nothing. No works of art lining the walls, no antiques, no priceless jewelry, not even a bugle.
No, I haven't read
Just
anything or
a
watched
bare
anything on it
attic
yet.
apartment, much like
Chat
any
mentioned it
other.
once, though.
Wait, what? On witnessing her boyfriend being apprehended by the police at the Wagner Museum in Lucerne, Anne Catherine had immediately realized the dangers and sprung into action, driving back home and alerting the one person every man can rely on when shit really hits the fan: his mother. And Mrs. Breitweiser had outdone herself. Over the course of several days, she'd gathered up every single piece of art her son had ever stolen, packed it all up into her car, and gotten it the hell out of there. Anything that sank ended up in a nearby Rhine canal. And the paintings, those centuries-old priceless works of art, were burnt to ashes.
Holy
as
shit.
part of what may very well have been the most expensive private bonfire in history. The last few odds and ends were
That's
unceremoniously dumped in a nearby forest. Had the Rhone-Rhine Canal been just a little deeper, Stefan Breitweiser might once again have slipped through the fingers of the justice system. But it wasn't to be. Hikers spotted a curious twinkle from the depths of the canal about a week after the haul had been dumped. And the rest is history.
That's fucking
Police
crazy.
frogmen were called in to dredge the waterway, and close to 100 treasures from Stefan's mighty hoard were fished out and catalogued. Of course, at this point, the authorities had no idea how all that stuff had actually ended up in the canal. But one of the officers holding Stefan in Switzerland got wind of the find, and on a
True
whim
Tory.
decided to see if he could link the treasures to his bugle thief. After all, they'd been found not too far from his home city. During an interrogation, the officers showed Stefan a picture of one of the artifacts recovered from the canal. Stefan had no idea what his mother had been up to since his arrest, and so, on seeing an image of one of his most prized possessions in the hands of the police, he reached the obvious conclusion: they'd searched his apartment and found his hoard. The game was up. Stefan promptly confessed to having stolen the piece, matter-of-factly explaining when and where he'd taken it. The officer was absolutely delighted.
Well, I
He'd
imagine
figured
he
this
would
whole
be. That's
idea
big.
was a long shot, but he'd hit the jackpot first time. Stefan was shown image after image of rare and expensive artwork stolen from all around Europe, and he confessed to having stolen every single piece. Never in their wildest dreams had the Swiss police thought that this one man could have possibly taken everything they dredged out of the canal.
Well, why are they believing him? He could be
all
covering
on
for
his
the other
own.
people.
And yet, quite clearly, he had. So, what punishment does a man receive for
said, dog.
stealing over $1 billion worth of art? hands chopped off at the wrists, tongue drawn and quartered, guillotine to the face. No, just 3 years in prison.
What?
Stefan only served a little over 2 of those. His mother, for her part in disposing of the art, served just 18 months. Anne Catherine, hinting that she too had been gifted with a fairly weighty set of metaphorical balls, denied having any involvement in the thefts whatsoever. In fact, she claimed to have had no idea Stefan was even an art thief. The court probably wouldn't have bought it, but it seems Stefan was happy to take the bullet for his girlfriend, because he confirmed every word that came out of her mouth. Anne Catherine was sentenced to 6 months for receiving stolen goods, but she only spent a single night behind bars.
Oh my god.
It doesn't end quite there either, because it turns out prison did absolutely nothing to reform Stefan Breitwieser. In 2011, police found more than 30 works of art stashed in his house. Stolen, naturally.
Just sell it,
Stefan.
Stefan.
For 3 years behind bars.
Jesus.
And in 2019, he was arrested once again for trying to sell a paperweight stolen from a museum in San Luis on eBay.
Thank you. At least you tried to sell
I
it
know,
this
he got
time.
sloppy. But hey, sloppy or not, Stefan Breitwieser remains quite possibly the greatest art thief to have ever lived.
No, he's more the dumbest
Thanks
thief
for
to
watching.
ever exist, I would say.
Do you really?
He just chose the right target. Like, he's perhaps one of the dumbest thieves I've ever heard of. He just went to the right places. All he did was take the fucking art off of the wall when no one was looking at him. That's like something you do as a child when you take a cookie out of the jar when your mom leaves the room. No one else thought of it like he did? Yeah, because it's so stupid. But I guess, to be fair, if you've ever been to an art museum, I've only been to one actual one. I went to the Salvador Dali Museum when I was a kid. There's no security. There is only cameras. And his strategy was just push the camera. And I guess they just never checked the cameras to see if it got pushed. So I guess just by pushing it and then waiting, you could just take anything from any art museum ever.